What's going on, macro perspective peeps? Seamus and Marcos here. I think, Marcos, this video is going to go down. It's probably one of our first few podcasts in the new year, 2025. That's right. And what we're going to be talking about today, team, is the nuances and the deep insights of fitness wearables, technology, fitness technology, and just tracking your metrics. I think talking about this at the start of the year, wherever you're at, is going to be great. I think fitness wearables are awesome pieces of technology. Devices are always going to be near you nowadays in the modern times. Why not lean into your health metrics? So Marcos, maybe we can kind of start with some of the thoughts on technology, where you've used it, how we use it with patients, clientele. I mean, there's so many things on the market now, whether it's the Apple Watch, the Aura Ring, Whoop, and even just tracking your metrics with like little apps. We could just kind of start there generally and go into reasons why the listener should be into these things.
Shit, man. That's a great question. I'm a purist and I don't believe in any of it.
I live in the backyard, or I live in the forest. I don't do none of that.
I'm more into perineum sunning.
Bro, you're bringing back 2019, man. That's a few years back.
I was hoping to get you to spit up your drink, if I'm being honest.
I know, man. Oh, man.
So, yeah, I think personally, I've used Whoop, and that was probably 2020, end of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
I got to remember, like, we just sold our first house, and I was living with my parents again with the babies. And I had a Whoop that was gifted to me. It was when the 4.0 came out. So I used that for like the 30-day trial, and I never continued with it. For me, again, like choosing a wearable is super important in regards to like, are you actually going to use tracked data to then actually shift behaviors? Because if you're not, it's useless, right? Yeah. So closing rings or whatever that might be, or the equivalent of accruing these, like, we call them digital badges, right? For some people, it becomes like a thing, like, oh, I just collect it, it's like Pokemon. But at the same time too, like, I actually had a client that like became too entrenched in like achieving the badge from her Apple Watch wearable for her steps. And I was trying to tone down her steps. Like, well, it keeps on adding more activity to like, to everything. I was like, well, we're trying to calm you down so we can build you back up, So again, for health outcomes and using data and a particular wearable, again, you have to also be willing to maybe listen to like the coach that's trying to help use that information and informatics to help you, achieve your health and fitness goals. Right. So I think, where do we take this episode in terms of, do we talk about like different categories? Do you want to talk about different categories? You want to talk about assess, use, or?
I think I want to talk about just kind of like first and foremost, the one thing you just talked about there is probably this is like health anxiety around digital trackers, because I've been there before and I've seen that in like my fiance, for example, where you use a steps tracker. I bought the Fitbit like 10 years ago or something like that, and like 10,000 steps was this big goal, and she's brushing her teeth, right, and trying to do 10,000 steps to finish her day at the end of the night before she does her face wash routine. Talk about like maybe like the importance of these things, and the specific general guidelines of them, right? Like an Apple Watch, like a Fitbit or a Whoop, or even we could even go as deep as a CGM. But understanding that these tracking wearables, what's the reinforcers of them from the habits and coaching routine that we're talking about, or even from there, what are the cons, right? What are the cons, and what are the things that we can fall in trap to, kind of like what you did maybe, or what may happen with somebody is they fall into a trap with that client of yours. It's like, well, wants to do all these steps. So we can go everywhere with it, but yeah, let's try to specific it down a little bit for the audience.
Yeah. So then in terms of wearable technology, right, the big names or the key people in the market right now, as I understand it, would be Whoop, Aura, obviously Apple and Samsung, because of their watches and their digital interfaces that are kind of linked to their health existing apps. Those are ones that are tracking kind of like we'll call them like the fitness tracker wearables, right?
Yeah.
Where, and I'm sure there's more, but let's just call those the fitness tracker wearable kind of category. And then we kind of have the health tracker wearable, right? I.e. the CGM, because I feel like, and there's also like electrolyte patches and things like that for people in sport, right? That would
Yeah.
be another wearable technically, right? You put on your person. I would also consider even just your phone a piece of like quote a wearable, even though it's not like attached to your person. It's kind
Yeah.
of like that unique category where it is and isn't like a wearable, because it's, you know, it's not like you're just strapping it on with an armband, and it's maybe a little more cumbersome, but it could kind of be in there. So for the fitness tracker ones, right? Pros and cons, right? I'll start with a pro. Pro is that it gives you some sort of feedback, right? It can give you some sort of approximation in terms of like, we'll use Whoop's strain kind of thing, how
Yeah.
hard you pushed yourself, right? Again, what does that actually mean? Don't really know. It's kind of an algorithm that looks at like heart rate, and your relative to your maximum heart rate, and over time it learns you even more through its AI,
Yeah.
and gives you some sort of associated score. So it's a pro that it does that, and the con to that is that how accurate is it? You know, I would
Yeah.
just say that as the AI gets better, and the machine learning understands stuff a little bit better, right? That the estimation will be a little more accurate in terms of like its potential caloric burn that it's estimating, right? But we know that these wearables could be off as much as 20, 30, 40, 50%, right? In terms of its estimation for calories burned.
Yeah. Yeah. There's even like 143 studies. I remember one of the executives I was working with on just like HRV stuff. I read 143 of these studies. I'm like, I'm the guy with the exercise science degree, and I haven't read all those studies. And he's like gotten the quantitative data, and he was like, and it summarized that there's a big percentage of error, with these things. And I think, that's one of the cons is when the data was coming out, when they're doing these studies, where is it really coming from? Because Whoop comes from that component of HRV, right, Marcos? Heart rate variability.
Mhm.
And with heart rate variability, well, you're getting it from the wrist or an aura from the finger. And I believe it's not true HRV. It's like a different component, like RFSSD. Like they're getting a different component, but then they extrapolate that noise and then go, okay, this is relative proxy for HRV. A true HRV would be wearing a heart rate monitor, right? So if any runners out there that wear heart rate monitors, you can get like an Elite HRV app or HRV monitoring or a Morpheus, which is like another fitness app. And then you could see your HRV for 2 weeks, like you would like blood pressure in the morning after waking. And you would then probably get like a true HRV reading. Um, so those are some pros, those are some cons. Is like, well, how technical is this data? How well do we do it? I think when it comes to pros and cons, sometimes the data may not necessarily be as tight or as rigorous as we want it, but from a consumer standpoint, the interface of a Whoop, it's just so much better than other interfaces. You know what I'm saying? Like an Aura has that sleep score, like, oh, you got an 86%, and it's like this like a gauge, and you're like, I can see that, and you could kind of realize like, okay, there is machine learning here, the technology is getting better, and you don't have to be so precise with these delicate instruments. You can kind of just give face to it as much as you can. Plus, you know I like the Aura Ring as compared to a Whoop because I feel it's a fashion statement. Having two things on my wrist, I feel like, what am I like wearing something on my wrist? Like, what am I ready to go or something?
Mm. That's another thing to consider is like I guess like that notion of like this person's obviously like really into his health, and you have like 14 different monitors on you.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
to
I
buy.
feel like the whole the wearables is great, but I feel like 10 years ago the quantified self movement got too big where they're like tracking every metric that there was there, and it's like, well, I don't think we need to be that nuanced about it just to figure out some key things. I think the sleep is such a big component when it comes to the strain or ring. I think that's big, that's good enough, right?
I mean, beats me, man. Again, I'm not using one currently. I mean, I have
Yeah,
people using it that I coach. And so it's
yeah.
like interesting to then, again, to what level or to what piece of data amidst all the stuff in the dashboard, is it actually like things that they're queuing in on, right? So again,
Yeah.
that is where how I'm trying to again perceive certain things or see certain trends, right? Amidst
Hmm.
that,
Hmm.
and then associate that with maybe some other form of tracking, using the wearable to then help with like estimation tools. And I will say though, I mean, of these ones that give you estimated calories burned, right? Again, like I'm only really familiar with Whoop, and Whoop does actually a pretty decent job.
Does a pretty decent job
with its caloric strain estimate, and I would have to imagine it's because it's being worn 24/7. Like it's on your person. Like they even came up with like, again, you put a charger on it, you don't put it on a charger. Like, and again, like, this feels like it's a Whoop ad, but like in terms of like maybe getting into the weeds of understanding and not missing out on data, you need to probably have 24/7 untethered access to a person's biometrics in order for you to
make a decision.
Make and understand and build that kind of estimation. And shoot, man, I know that like how the pulse ox stuff or whatever it is that goes on in like the newest generations of Apple Watch, right? Because they have like and even with like Garmin, right? Like they have the way that how it goes about actually giving you your heart rate. It also gives you like estimations of oxygen. So I wonder if that has some other factors and things that they like use machine learning to like learn more about. So, I mean, it's really fascinating. I've actually thought about, like, fun fact, apparently you can use your HSA to actually pay for Whoop.
That's how I did it. I paid for a year like that. Yeah, like 40% off or something.
So I was like, okay, cool. Maybe I will take and test this experiment over the next year. Again, look at sleep scores, look at recoverability. Is it relating to overtraining and overstraining, and does like having a certain HRV lead to better like definition and visual evidence for self? So again, like the wearable market, I mean, do you have figures in terms of like what the projections are?
They said that they sold. I was in a meeting about so Whoop and Dexcom just came together. I was just in this meeting last week. Dexcom is another wearable. That's a CGM, continuous glucose monitor. The Dexcom, a pro and con here, and we're bringing in the CGMs now. The pro with the Dexcom is compared to the Freestyle Libre. The Dexcom is allowing for populations that aren't diabetic or obese, just normal populations, so they can kind of just look at that. There are a few cons to, I think, like wearables. I mean, you got to put it in you for like 14 days. Sometimes they're trying to think of like a yearly one, but also if you don't have the right sensors, or you have the Bluetooth on, and the sensors could go off in the middle of the night, thinking you're having like a caloric hypo sugar insulin issue, and it wakes you up. Distresses your sleep a little bit. There's some cons there, but Dexcom and Whoop just had this conversation where I think it was like 2 million sales last year. Now they're going to double it to like 4 to 5 million users this next year. And they're integrating that data with the Dexcom Loop. So the cool thing about that is, you think wearable technology, this space is getting so big and so much better and more affordable. These other companies, Dexcom and Whoop, they're coming together for that health enthusiast or just someone that needs some helping, some coaching where, hey, look, this is my sugar numbers. This is what I'm eating. This is what the Whoop is saying. This is my sleep. This is my activity, and it just really helps quantify you. Honestly, pretty passively. You just wear it. You just wear it, and I actually have access to my clients' information, and I just look at that stuff. Their sugar levels, their activity levels. I'm like, oh, cool. This is great. And they don't need to look at it sometimes. So.
I didn't know that they. Who bought who?
I don't think they bought. I think this is a partnership.
Oh, got it.
Yeah. So it's not Dexcom and Whoop. I think it's Longevity. There's a longevity company that their interface brings it together.
Okay.
So it's their interface, but it was really cool to see how they're using wearables. They're using wearables to track data outside of clinical practitioner time. It's just 24/7.
Okay, I like that. I didn't. Yeah, I mean, CGM, right? Like that data. Again, like it's like, what is it? As thin as the hair or whatever it is that they say, like a strand of hair that's just in you. It could be a little bit of a nuisance. The fact that the sensor only has like a 14-day potential like utilization time. And then you have to swap it out. Again, same thing though. It is using that like kind of 24/7 kind of monitoring, right? In a sense, but yeah, like imagine if there was a way to kind of get like a minimally invasive thing that literally like is powered off of like your own body's electricity to constantly monitor these things. And I'm sure it will get to that point where it's like, hey, literally it's like a one-time thing. It's just like a subdermal thing in the shoulder, right? And it's like giving you your sugar
Data.
feedback data.
Well,
Yeah.
I saw something recently too about it was on the thigh. It's like another company that's coming out. Like they're looking at like your exercise data. Like it's on the thigh. I don't know if it's your cortisol or like your muscle lactate. I don't know. But I was like, dude, it's so cool. Like there's just constantly these new things, man.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I mean, wearable, man. I mean, again, I don't want to talk crap on it in a sense. I just don't use it, right? Like, I don't know if it has as much utility for me personally as simple metrics that I could look at with just
Yeah,
movement steps, you know?
let's talk
Um,
about that, dude. Moving from the wearables, but to the things that we track with our patient client base, steps. Let's talk
yeah.
about that.
Well, Whoop didn't have it integrated and now it does. So now it just makes more of a case of like getting one because it does. I want to see like,
Yeah,
oh shit, like how many again, like the excuse of like, well, I don't always have my phone on me, you know? It's like, yeah, but it's a good proxy. Like if you're not, it's like I'm not like it doesn't count my steps when I'm in the gym. It's like, yeah, that's not the point. I want to know what your activities outside of the gym. I want you to work out
yeah.
as one, as exercise, and I want activity to be, I guess it's technically still exercise, but like this low level thing that's just like basic necessity for life. It's just like
Yeah.
doing stuff, doing some sort of quote work. So, again, the fact that um, that it has that now finds more interest to me. But again, utilizing some very simple other technology, right? There's always some sort of psychological relationship with it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Always. Scale being one of them, right? Let's call that another piece of health tech, right? This is not a wearable, but it is something that most people will likely again step on or not do because it has them feel it gets them in their feels at some point.
I have to call you out on that one and give you a little bit of highlight here because I remember you said something along the lines of like 3 years ago, oh, I love the Bluetooth scales more because some clients have an issue with seeing the number.
Mm-hmm.
So I just have them tape it. They never see it. They just step on and it's always there. And I was like, I stole that, man. The scale, not the normal scale, but the Bluetooth scale
Yeah,
that's
or
constantly
yeah.
on the Wi-Fi is 24/7. I was like, I've had so many. I just spoke with a client today. She struggles with the scale, and I was like, yeah, just cover it the tape, and it just makes sense.
And you have to train yourself. Your condition, everything you do, you condition yourself to do, right?
Yeah.
So if you use the feedback of a wearable to then dictate like how much food you would then eat, right? Again, there's some sort of
Hmm.
relationship to this arbitrary number. It's an arbitrary number on the scale, right? Yes, it
Yeah.
also maybe does an estimate with body fat, and you can see that too, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I see basically a plus or minus 1% in terms of my body fat on my scale due to hydration, right?
Yeah.
And again, this number does correlate over to a DEXA scan quite nicely, right?
And
So
what scale do you use, Marcos?
it's a Withings Body Plus scale, I believe.
Perfect. Got you.
Right.
That's a good one. It's like it's the middle one,
It's
right?
like $100,
It's
I think, right?
$100. It's not the Withings normal one. It's like $50. It's not the $250 one, but it's kind of right in the middle. It's got everything you need at a good fair rate.
Yeah, mid-tier, mid-tier option. Great. I've had to replace the batteries on it like one time in the like last
Same.
however many years I've had it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, work, for gifting us that. It's been a great addition to something that I can utilize. And again, this has another app interface that some people are like, the app's not working 100%. It's like, yeah, like your Wi-Fi might suck. I don't know, right? I'm not like the IT person always, but I
Yeah.
mean, even if as long as you've stepped on it, it's collected it. When it gets pushed and synced, it might not be as great. For whatever reason, it syncs over to my Trainerize account like that,
Every
but
time. Every
it's not
time.
in the actual Withings app, which I'm just like, I don't even know what the fuck is going on. But it's like, I can check my Trainerize account apparently.
Yeah.
So, all right, cool. Right. Like but there's another potential spot for me to now use my device and its integration into something else that I'm using on a daily basis. Then it's like, oh shit, like I wasn't supposed to look at my weight, but now I see it first thing on the dashboard there, right? Again, app interfaces and wearables and all those things, the dashboard are usually pretty customizable for you, right?
Yeah.
Eliminate the things that are fucking triggering, right? Like
Yeah.
if there's any word of advice that I could give people, right? Learn to care less about certain things. Worry more about getting after the things that you've set out as that kind of personal goal.
I love it. I think one thing there, the pros and cons of weight, just tracking weight, and we're not even asking you to lose weight or gain weight right now. This is just the concept of tracking, guys. So for the audience listening, when I work with someone for the first month, I just want them to track just to get an understanding of tracking. But the pro there is, yes, we're getting data. The con there, it can be emotionally triggering for some folks. That's why I love what Marco said. Put the tape on, get the Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, mid-tier option.
And
The beautiful thing is we're not necessarily even looking at day to day. We get the day to day. We learn how to not be emotionally attached to the weight. But then
mhm.
it takes about 2 to 3 weeks to manifest the coaching protocols that I gave you as a client, as a patient. That's why my check-ins in are every 2 to 3 weeks because a week is not enough time for some of these things. 2 to 3 is like appropriate just to kind of see what's going on with the scale, right?
Yeah, and damn, I mean, I guess I just like pull up my trainer eyes overview of myself and share the screen to that. Hold on. Um, because that one's
Well,
integrated, but it's like more or less the same thing.
yeah.
Let me find myself there, and then we'll shameless plug it. Um,
And this is the stuff that we use with our clients. So for the audience listening, Trainerize is like the platform. I think a lot of strength and conditioning, fitness, nutrition, health, and wellness coaches use. There's other ones, but I've always loved Trainerize just because it just integrates everything. I've just been using it for so long, and I have data that goes back like 5 years on me, or like even 3 to 5 years. So let's see what Marcos is saying here.
yeah, do you see that? All right, cool. So, if you see this, right, the scale is being synced. Like it has my body fat percentage just, estimated with bioimpedance, which again is not a perfect metric whatsoever. But again, the
Yeah,
scale's been around for a while and it's doing a decent job of assessing a trend. So um, it's been ping ponging kind of all over the place since October as it was getting paired over. But again, this is just normal deviations,
yeah,
right? From we'll call it like day to day or week to week, right? Body weight,
yeah.
we do see kind of what I mean. Again, Seamus, what do you
Ebbs and
see?
flows. Okay, first and foremost, the thing for me is I see this. If you take the arrow from the left to the right, it's a downward trend. That's the first thing I saw. And then the second thing I see is just these peaks and valleys, peaks and valleys, peaks and valleys. And you know what? That's okay because if you look at this left-hand side, like I'm comfortable with these peaks and valleys because the overall trend for me is down, It's down. And then you could probably correlate it with like obviously talking about tracking metrics on a Trainerize app or other apps on your phone, your nutrition, right? You can look
Mhm.
at your weight on your nutrition. We were talking about steps. What were your steps at these times? At your leanest here earlier in the year, which is like your birthday in June, your leanest was like maybe he really was eating on calories on point, and then he was really on his steps, for example. These are
Uh,
just questions in my head.
yeah. All right. You see okay, so I moved it to like the 3-year view. And this is the
Yeah,
benefit of using again technology. And again, this is not a wearable, right? But this is again kind of delved into this, right? Like or it's assessing something, right? And what are we able to kind of look at this and be like, all right, like there was an attempt here, there was a gain, and there was a big loss, and then it's kind of been like maintenance mode here, right?
yeah, yeah,
Um, but it's crazy because like I remember this part was like you and I were doing something. This goes
we
back.
did a challenge last year. Yep.
Um, and then this is where we started rowing.
Your aerobic capacity as you built was good
Yeah, but like I just kept eating all the way up to here, and then
to
I was like,
December. Yeah.
and I was like, screw it, I'll go back into like bulk mode and get to this like the weight where it's like again, the most I basically weighed were a year apart.
Yeah.
Into this like again from January till the middle of the year, right? Like this really diet mode. And the thing that kind of sucks though I wish I had been better about this, is I forgot to have the scale enable the body fat percentage. So you only get like this little piece of info from,
The year
that
on.
part of, the February 21st one. And
There's a
then,
straight line, bro. It's a straight line down.
well, the scale wasn't turned on. I didn't have that mode enabled.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I did it in the background, but certain things, again, I didn't have it turned on for whatever reason. And I don't think the steps get brought over here. Oh yeah, they do. So steps kind of in a similar kind of front. No data added. Oh, those are from a while ago. So I didn't sync the steps, but that was when it was syncing, and it was kind of, again, lots of activity, right? But again, like the whole point of data and information as a whole is then what are you changing? What are you doing? Right?
It's those habits, routines, man. Yeah.
It really is, right? And so, like I said, there's some sort of like relationship with the numbers. We get it. Up is usually worse, unless it's like muscle mass, and like I want it to go up. As soon as it's not going up anymore, you're like, oh my god, my muscle mass is down. Fuck, right? Like you feel the easy way to feel dejected is to look at numbers, because you're just like, again, these things are going to fluctuate, right? So you get to this point on the scale. Again, Seamus has stolen that. I have a few other clients that, they're the way that they go about their day and don't pay attention to like their food as much or their other kind of behaviors that go on. It's like an immediate like trigger first thing, So you wake up first thing in the morning with your wearable, and it tells you that your recovery score was 76 today. Yesterday was 98. You did the exact same thing. What happened? I don't know. Is it just like the way that the algorithm's running because of the HRV being lower, right? Then you look at it over the course of the week, right? Again, like you have to remember that the timeline and the journey of using the wearable or the piece is really like make it more macro, right? Have a macro perspective.
Have a macro perspective, guys.
with it. And same thing with like, again, when was the best time to get into Bitcoin?
15 years ago, apparently.
You're shooting yourself in the foot thinking that the gains can't be made, so you won't ever do it. But you're like, oh my god, but if I would have just like put some money towards that thing right now, even though it's like still, again, very much so a new technology in its infancy stages, right? Or when's the best? I should have started investing when I was 30. Like I'm 40. You're just gonna not do it now? No. Again, you may have missed out on some compounding stuff, but maybe now you have more money to actually throw at it because you can actually do that, right? Like fitness, nutrition, using your data is the same way. It's like, hey, shoot, like I wish I would have had this when I first started, because like if I'm starting my fitness journey and I had nothing to look back on, right? Yep. Photos, whatever, then you got nothing. You got nothing to be like, oh my God, like I literally went from a sleep score that was like dog shit 30 into like now where it's like I'm hovering in the 80, 90s, having a low day like that. Like, again, that health data is more about, again, maybe you had a sickness or, your CNS was shot because you like pulled a heavy deadlift and it like took you a fucking week to recover.
Took a whole week to recover, dude. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Right. So like that, I mean, the wearable stuff, man, I mean, again, like it's fascinating. Maybe we should do that. We should actually like get back into wearing one.
I'll probably get back on the Whoop for the 2025. I'll jump on it with you. Okay. I think the wearable technology is great. I'm doing it. There's other reasons why people need to do it because they may need it. Like in our practice, we need to look at that CGM. What's going on? Folks maybe really locked in. They need to just wear that. And sometimes, like a CGM or a Whoop, it comes down to the behavior, right, Marcos, where you're using this data to then work with a coach, to maybe a coach like me or a coach like Marcos or an integrative practitioner, such as like a synergenics practice or a functional nutrition practice, wherever, to make better decisions for yourself. I think this is data just to make better decisions for yourself and pinpoint certain aspects of your life. And yeah, we look at the macro perspective because sometimes, I've seen clients do the 3 p.m. cappuccino with a mocha frap and add it in. And they're like, Seamus, I don't know why I keep having these issues and I can't sleep at night. And then their CGM, I'm like, let me ask you, what happens between 2 and 3? What's going on there? And they're like, oh, you're right. And sometimes it's these blind spots folks don't have. I think the CGMs or wearable or tracking just helps. I think one of the biggest things is when we look at behavior, it's not all at once that we need to change, right? You don't wear the Whoop, you don't wear the CGM, you don't track your macros or your scale weekly, and then the next week you're, on stage like a C-bum, right? Like I think it just really comes to where your goals are at with the behavior. If your behavior is, look, it's the new year, when this podcast comes out, it's like that time, and I just want to look good for summer. What are the key metrics that we need to look at for you? Okay, hey, let's really look at the steps because maybe more activity is what you need. Or maybe, hey, you're tracking your food, and you need to really lock in that food tracking. Or hey, we really want to get these results down. So every week you are on the scale, and you just have to look at what are those key metrics, and then what are they doing with the rest of the behavior for the year? Are you saying no to a few things, right, Marcos? Like, hey, there's date nights. I gotta say no to the extra dessert at date night, or I gotta make sure that I do date night smart, or hey, I'm hanging out with the boys, but maybe just no drinks this week, and just being smart about a certain season in your life, right? I think the power of these technologies are there, the metrics are there, the tracking's there, but just being smart in those certain seasons.
Ooh, I mean, shoot, man. I mean, it'll be interesting. I mean, because you brought up another one too with like the chest strap, and then how like there's other apps that relate to just using like a simple polar band. So like,
Yeah.
um,
I think that's for like a lot of like runners or like athlete type folks, right? I use it a lot for running and like high rocks type workouts. So yeah.
yeah, I used mine this morning on my nice long jaunt as well.
Yeah.
And again, like I'm doing nothing with the data right now. I'm just simply collecting it. I'm using a wearable to be like, all right, cool. Like, what was my heart rate at? And it's funny because, like, again, my subjective zone 2 number is not maybe what my body is actually adapted for, knowing how other things relate to it. Right. I was like,
Yeah.
dude, I did not, it was like easy,
Easy pace.
easy pace. Right. Me and Adam were talking the whole way, we're like, again, like we're just like, hey, we're going to go out and back. But now I can go back and talk about it today. So it's like, I got the
How
data.
many miles did you guys do?
3.5 is what it ended up being.
And then you were talking, but what did it say the zone was? Zone 3, zone 4?
So yeah, like zone 3, 4. It got to like 4-ish at the end, simply because it was like a grade. So we're uphill
Yeah.
a little bit with that.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, instead I got to 175 in the beginning. They just like moved my heart rate monitor, which, because I've never seen that number like ever in anything I've done.
Weird. That's
And our
weird.
average pace per kilometer was 625, and we're using KMs because we're running a kilometer.
625 is pretty good, man. 625 is pretty solid. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're obviously we're using that to kind of gauge for the actual like Hyrox event, right? So hey, not only like obviously the wearable wasn't keeping track of that, but like what was the heart rate? What zone are you in? Is it going to translate over into having that faster pace? I'm using the wearable stuff and the technology to then help understand, like, hey, if I can get this pace, because again, if we have this goal of our runs for the kilometer taking 5 minutes, right? Like, what zone is that going to be? Can it be
Bro,
close?
you hauling ass, bro. You hauling, bro.
Hey,
Yeah.
we said 40 minutes for the runs, right? Well, there's 8 of them, so we got a 5-minute pace, which is like what, 7.5 mile per hour pace, right?
What's your all out mile right now then?
Well, that's miles per hour, so that's hold up, let's ask ChatGPT that really quick.
Yeah, it's interesting because 1,000 kilometers, oh man, I think you could do. I mean, Jason, one of our coaches, he did 520, 515 average. I think like a 520 average. So and that's only one person on the high rock, so it's two people. So I think you can hit the 5. You can hit like a 5, maybe a sub 530 for sure.
Yeah, right. So 7.5 miles per hour is what the pace would need to be in order to do that, right? So if I run is that an 8-minute mile, right? 7.5, 8 times 7 is 56, right? So that's an 8-minute mile pace technically, right? Am I tripping?
Yeah.
Right?
I think you're probably hitting like a 750 and below, maybe per mile.
Well, we'll see. We'll see.
We'll
Again,
see.
that's the part. So this is us actually using the data to then, expand upon something, right? A particular goal. Like, hey, we need this to happen, and we're using some other stuff to kind of be like, is that even possible?
Yeah.
Right? Then we're going to temper our expectations, and then adrenaline hits, so you're going to be a little bit higher. So it's just, we don't even know, but that's part of the fun behind using wearables in another way. And I think when you're using it for more of a performance-based thing, that it becomes a little less
I think it's a
qual.
less more anxiety driven. I think it's
Yeah,
more gamification. I think you're like, oh, let me try this out today, you know? Well, for me personally.
the same, right? It's more about the gamification of it. And I think if you can use that stuff as gamifying, as soon as your wearable allows you to gamify things that you are likely going to improve, like I said, if nothing changes, if nothing changes, right?
Yeah.
So therefore, I'm getting like, hey, I'm going to use the Whoop because I want to see if I can get my HRV to be better, right? I
Yeah.
want to know what my strains are. I want to see if I can use this as a replacement for steps,
Yeah.
versus where my phone has done. There's a lot of things I want to use it for that don't give me anxiety. That
Yeah.
that it gives me information that I would like to, again, continue to collect over time. Um, but then also, like the other kind of what's the word?
Metrics, all
Like
those.
the pessimist in me, or the one who wants to be a little bit like, hey, if big tech has all this information on me based on
Ah,
my health data.
that's a con. Well, I'll tell you this, and I'm gonna kind of speak upon this is like find more ways to win, right, Marcos? I think finding more ways to win and having more ideas to and having more things to have for metric is going to help with that. So if someone were coming on here and they're becoming a coaching client, and the only thing we care about is weight loss, right, Marcos? You, a client is going to have a hard time always just looking at the scale and hating that. But if we gamify it and we have other metrics to win, hey, how did your sleep go? How's your other biofeedback markers like your stress? How's your food? How's your nutrition intake? And there's so many ways to win because weight
Mhm.
doesn't go straight down. So I just want to clarify that for the listener. Like, hey, look, there's so many ways to win. And then for the performance aspect, for guys like us that are, we're not necessarily worried about weight too much, or we're kind of more worried about the performance aspect. Yeah, there you go. Where's that pace? Are we at an 8-minute mile pace? Are we at 1,000 meter pace? Whatever we're at. And I think it gives us a training marker to play with. And it's just so many ways to win instead of going, hey, did I lose 5 pounds or not this week?
Yeah, I mean, again, you always got to find ways to win, and the things that wearables do is it provides a lot of insight to things that kind of gets collected in the background, and I'm a big advocate for that. So collect that information in the background about like normal behaviors, and then when you look to change something, hopefully it leads to improvements to it. And
Yeah.
that's kind of, again, like it's the same kind of thing of like you can use the wearable and do all the things like kind of normal and don't even have to worry about like tracking or documenting anything. It just kind of does all the main stuff for you, right?
Yeah.
And then you can go back and look at stuff later because, as you said, it's like it's going to take 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks before you have something really observable. Hey, that you're like, hey, again, day to day when it comes to anything in health, like it's never going to be the same. You're going to wake up every morning and do a blood pressure reading, for example, and it's like chances are it's not
Different.
going to be identical, right? So what gives? It's like, hey, it's the same thing as weight. Did you have more salt the night before or more water? How long did you sleep? Right? How's your stress level? Right? There's something else that's like, again, a biometric entry that, again, you can collect daily, much like your scale weight, that's going to have a fair deal of variance from day to day,
Yeah.
right? And you can likely then figure out what the standard deviation would be for you personally. It's like, I'm always between, plus or minus. Like I said, my weight is roughly within the same 3 pounds right now. So I'm anywhere as low as 195 and all the way up to about, 201, 202. The other day I got to like 204. I was like, I gotta rein my shit in a little bit, Like I was like, I overdid it, had a little extra, a little extra food, and that's how I'm using a technology to kind of guide my decisions right now. You
Yeah.
know, would I like to see a scale weight of like sub 190? I'd probably, my wife would divorce me. So the answer to that is yes. Like,
That's funny, dude. That's funny. Well, I love it, man. I think this conversation is the perfect placeholder for 2025, right? I think kind of
get it
starting
started.
out the year here is great. I think if someone can extract from this conversation, what should I do for 2025? I think the biggest thing you can get is some form of tracking, some form of metric, and to make it easier for yourself, maybe a wearable, whether that's a Whoop, an Apple Watch. Most of these things are already on your phone, so that makes it a lot easier. But what's the whole point of this? It's behavior change at the end of the day. We don't just use the data to just get data, but what we like to say, kind of like what Peter Drucker says in his book, Effective Manager, Effective Executive, is what gets measured gets managed. So it's like your
Mm-hmm.
finances. You start measuring those finances, you can start managing and putting that budget to the certain things you want. It's the same with your health. If you start tracking your steps, you start tracking your nutrition, you start tracking your sleep, start looking at those fundamentals, you could start making your 2025 a great year if you adjust accordingly in those areas.
I mean, fucking super well said. You know, that which gets tracked gets managed, you know, and just like I said, it's like I know what my normal deviation of steps and weight and things are. And I bring, and again, like it never really stresses me out unless like, again, like I don't need the scale to tell me I've been a bad boy, been naughty.
It just quantifies it.
Yeah.
It just mirrors it back to your face. Here you
And
go.
I don't necessarily need my step tracker on my phone to tell me that I've had a lazy day. I know that I've had that lazy day. But when I look back at that particular date, why?
Mm-hmm.
Why did I have a lazy day?
Yeah, what
Right?
happened?
Were there
Yeah.
things that were, again, out of my control for that day? Was it a holiday? Like, I mean, I look back and like I had 4,000 steps on Thanksgiving. All I needed to do, Seamus, is go for a fucking walk, dude. Like, I had nothing
After you ate. Yeah.
like, and I was like, nah, fuck it. Like, I don't even want to try to get the 10K today. I literally
Yeah.
napped on the couch. You know what I mean?
There you go. There you
So,
go.
but again, I'm like, I'm going to not worry about it.
Yeah.
You know, because normally during holiday seasons past, I would get lazier. I would still work out, but I get lazier in my activity front. So, you know, and same thing too. Like, I mean, being in front of your office job, like, what, you know, pick one. Do get something. Could be a low entry level model thing. I mean, that's why I kind of liked when Amazon was trying to get into like the wearable space with their Halo tracker because it was like very similar to Whoop. And I think some of their technology maybe Whoop even bought out. I don't even know. But again, like it sounds like this is like a fucking ad for Whoop, but again, like to me, in terms of like a wearable that I would most personally use, it's definitely either the Oura Ring or the Whoop because of again the ease and convenience, right? I think
of everything, yeah,
of everything, right? In terms of like things that it gives, in terms of things that I would track and change, right?
It
So
also has journals in there too, because there's other metrics you can add in, like are you consuming caffeine or are you?
Yeah.
There's like 100 different biofeedback things too. So.
True. That stuff again, like that's where it started to like kind of take a little bit
of a dive for me. It was taking too long. I was like, I just do 1, 2, 3, and I'll go.
Yeah, or I would skip it all together. But like again, now I'm like, if I could just condense, I didn't realize you could edit it and condense it down to like more questions that were just like that you wanted to answer, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, again, don't ever get overwhelmed to feel like you need 100 data points to constantly track because chances are, at some point, it's going to lead to some level of like fallout when there's too much going on. So, you know, find that thing, find that wearable. Again, like you just said, maybe it is a CGM that like is used with like levels, which is less for diabetic management, but more about like how your response to certain foods are. You may even find your food allergies as a result. We didn't even go into that.
Yeah, we put that up for another time. Yeah.
But so again, like these things can then allow for behavior change, but are you ready for it? You know, and again, like,
are you ready, willing, and able? I think that's the question to ask, right?
100%, man. And yeah, I'm stoked that hopefully people, as they're listening to this, whenever we do decide to drop it, like they're, you know, however many listeners we have at the time, they get something out of it. They you know, realize like, hey, maybe I should go get a wearable. You know, they can drop a comment and ask which ones that we're trying to utilize. Again, probably going to be maybe a 1 year kind of Whoop deal, just to again go back to that. And
yeah,
nice thing is too, the one thing that I think is really interesting, man, is you don't have to actually buy the technology, like the actual physical hardware. Like you pay for the membership and then they like, you know, they'll upgrade it as they get to like the next iteration of things, which is kind of cool. I like that personally when it comes to like tech things. So if more, you know, imagine you buy a Garmin Phoenix for $1,000, but every year you just get to recycle your old one to like the next model. Like
that'd be great. Yeah,
the Garmin Next program, just like AT&T Next or whatever, the Apple iPhone.
Exactly. Because it's crazy how technology just gets changes every year, and it looks better every year. The ecosystems that they're making are looking better every year. I mean, like the Garmin ecosystem, my fiance has a whole thing. I'm like, yo, I love it.
Too much, but yeah, guys, comment, like, subscribe. I mean, this year is going to be an exciting one for Seamus and myself personally. We can already feel it. We feel like the winds of change of 2025, just like we knew 2024 would be more of like a lower key year. We're trying some new things where obviously like this episode is a little bit on the shorter end, but it's going to be part of our more like kind of frequent things to keep our exposure a bit higher. And engagement. Give us some constructive.
Give us some feedback, guys. Comment. hey, it could just be like, I'm gonna decide I'm gonna track this year. I'm gonna buy this wearable. Give us some feedback, get us like in knowing, get the community engaged a little bit. Comment below, guys. Thanks so much.
All right. Until next time, Macro Perspective, we are out.